Finished our study last week on Habakkuk, and today I want to start out by kind of asking a question, see if somebody may have any idea, if you hadn't read it in the notes already. How many churches are there in the United States? I hear a bunch. You know, good number. I have tried and tried for the past several days to figure out exactly what the number is for the amount of churches in the United States, and I don't believe anybody knows. There are estimations that there are over 350,000 Christian, congregations that are out here, but some places register as nonprofit, some places don't. You don't know if they're meeting in homes and they're registered at any level, but there's all different types of congregations that are out there. But if you use the 350,000 number, that would be one church for every 935 people in the country. And I think it's been said many times that Macon has more churches per capita than any other city in the United States, and that's debated because we don't even know exactly how many churches we have in Macon. They say it's around 200 plus churches just in this city alone, and with the population that we have in Macon-Bibb County, that's about a church for every 766 people. That we have here. I'm not exactly sure every church is filled with 766 people, but not every person in the entire society is going to go to church. You know that. So if 100% of the United States went to church, then every church would have somewhere in the ballpark of 935 folks in it. Or if every person went to church in Macon and Bibb County, we'd have about 766 people in each church. How does somebody choose which church to go to? Somebody tell me. You're saying the right way to do it. Yeah, Randy says pray about it. God leads you. All right. You know, okay. If I was going to start today at a church, I would probably look up social media and websites and all the stuff and try to get a little bit of a sense about that church. You obviously pray and you do all of those things, that we know that you're going to seek the Lord. But you try to find out about what that church believes, who they are, and all the rest of it, because within that 350,000 churches, we're split at least into about 30,000 different denominations. Now, the estimates go up to 51,000 and all of that, and it's because non-denominational, which is the camp that we seem to subscribe to here. What does that mean? There's so many different non-denominations. Some non-denominational people have become in associations. Raise your hand here if you at one point would consider yourself a Baptist. Okay, or maybe you still do. Okay, I'm just asking. All right, which is a lot of people here. Now, I can rightly ask you, what kind? I happen to grow up in the Southern Baptist Church. But there's missionary Baptist churches, there's hard shell Baptist churches, soft shell, depending on what your taste is and shells. Primitive Baptist churches, independent Baptist churches, national Baptists. There's all kind of Baptists. You don't really just one kind, so that's why you have that huge number. There's major denominations: Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, all the rest of those. But within those are many, many different subgroups out there. So what does that mean? That means that we're split up over the course of these, let's say, 350,000 congregations. We're split up with a ton of different beliefs around certain areas. Your Baptist, and your Methodist may differ on baptism and other types of things and how closely they're tied to some doctrine or the other. And so for me, if I'm going to look at a church, I'm really going to want to know, what do they believe? Because just because you put on your sign that you're a church, what does that mean today? What are they teaching? What type of Jesus are they preaching in that church? What type of Bible are they using? So I want to look at what that church believes, because obviously we have some issue across the board with churches having many different varying beliefs. You have large churches, you have small churches within this. You have way more smaller churches than you have large ones, but you have, if you just look at one independent congregation, the largest we have is about 43,000. and that would be Joel Osteen's church. You have other churches that are larger than his, where they have satellite campuses and all the rest. So you have that as the top number, around 43,000 people in attendance, all the way down to less than 20, less than 10 sometimes in certain churches, even in the United States. So there's your size that you can pick. Well, I want to be a part of a large church. I want to be a part of a small church. I want to be a part of a medium church, and you can choose that way. And I asked why so many churches, and why are they all so different? I just wanted that to kind of be in your mind. Why so many? Why do we have so? There's only, I think, 4,100 Walmarts in the United States. I mean, there's not even 350,000. I mean, a lot of people can go into a Walmart. I know of many businesses that have branches, banking and whatnot. The most they'll have 5,000 that I remember at the height of Bank of America having their branches out. But churches, we have one on every corner out there. And so I want to put this out here. Despite all the choices in churches today that you have, overall attendance has been declining for decades. Now, why would that be? I wonder why. You have 350,000 different choices of independent churches that you could go to. In this city, you have over 200 choices of churches you can go to. Different denominations, different belief systems, different sizes, different building types. All of the stuff you could possibly think of with what you may be looking for as a consumer to figure out which place that you want to go. Yet, attendance continues to decrease and decline. I would have thought, as some people may have, the more choice, the more broad your tent, the more all of that stuff that we did, the more people we'd be getting. Wouldn't you think so? Maybe not. This morning we're going to look at as a title, the church is it a place of business or is it a place of worship? A place of business, a place of worship. In John chapter 2, verses 13 through 17, it says, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple area. Both sheep and cattle, he scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market? His disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. In verse 13, we see that the Passover celebration was taking place and Jesus was going to Jerusalem. This would have been a common occurrence. Every Jewish male was supposed to return to Jerusalem, to the temple, to have the Passover celebrated there, and the Feast of Tabernacles and unleavened bread and all the rest of it that they would be having here. And I just meshed a couple together. But it was a week-long celebration that they would have. They traveled there. They were going to have some festivities, and Jesus would have been making this pilgrimage every year, I'm sure, or most of the time at least, with Joseph and Mary. The Bible tells us, so just like he normally would have been, he is on his way to celebrate the Passover in Jerusalem. In verse 14, when he gets to the temple courts, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at all this, but the temple, you would have the outer court areas, and it was filled when he got there. He found men selling cattle and sheep and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. Why? Why would they have been doing that? Why would they have been out there with selling cattle and sheep and doves? Because they had a sacrificial system that was in place at this time. You had to sacrifice animals to atone for your sins, and so you had to have those animals. Well, in the Old Testament, God's original plan about this was you were to take the best animal from your livestock so that it was personal, and then you would sacrifice that animal to the Lord. Well, as Jerusalem people in Jerusalem kept expanding out, and they moved to this area and that area of the known world at the time. The longer and longer the destinations were for them to get back to Jerusalem. Well, that's a long time to carry a goat or to take your cow or whatever the case may be. So the priest said, what we're going to do is set up a marketplace, and we're going to have people sell those animals to folks so that they can buy them en route to the temple. And they were doing that. As you can imagine, along the route of these people coming into the city of Jerusalem, there may have been all different types of farmers and whatnot, and people that would have been out there, and they would have had cattle and sheep and doves available for people to purchase, and that you would go along and you'd buy the best that you seen that farmer had, and you'd take it with you to the temple and sacrifice it. And wouldn't that have been an amazing solution to a problem that they were having? Absolutely. It absolutely would have been. It would be unthinkable today for me and Jim and others that are attempting to go to Jerusalem next year. If we were doing this and we still had the sacrificial system, I'm sure it'd be real hard to take our cattle on the plane with us. So what we would probably do is when we got there, we would buy us a nice fitting cow and take it up there and sacrifice it. The same issue was there then as it is now. People trying to pilgrim over there and do it, and they were trying to solve a problem. So you had them out there, and they were able to buy those things, but they're all filled out into the temple courts doing this. The second people that you see here in the end of verse 14 are the money changers. Have these others sitting at the tables exchanging money. Well, what are they doing? Why do they need to be doing that? You had many different forms of currency, but the most important that the temple cared about was the temple currency, which was different from the Roman currency that they had. And you had to, even if you had Roman money with Caesar stamped on that, if you were going to pay the temple tax, then you had to exchange that for temple currency. And so you had to exchange your money. If you had other people that were coming from various different provinces, maybe not even from the Roman Empire, but maybe from Greece or something like that, they had to exchange their money to local currency. So just like when you go to an airport today, what do you find at every single airport? Currency exchangers, because you need to get money. I mean, in the age of debit cards, it's not that big a deal anymore, but it certainly still is a big practice where you want to change that currency into the local currency. Same thing as you had people there that were able to do that for the convenience of those that were coming to pay their temple tax and also to be able to buy the animals that they needed. So at this juncture, if you're just looking at this, doesn't seem to be that big of a problem, does it? I mean, it's just solutions to problems that they were facing. But I think we've already read through this. Jesus had a problem with what was taking place. And we'll look and see what the problem was. In verse 15, it says, "So, after having observed what was taking place in the temple courts, Jesus made a whip out of cords, and he drove them all from the temple area, both the sheep and the cattle. He scattered the coins and the money changers and overturned their tables." If you go out in our foyer, there's many pictures out there of Christ and depictions of different Bible events and stories and all that. This is not hanging out there. It's not a popular picture of what Jesus has done, yet it is there. I've actually put it in your notes, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. There's a Facebook meme that I put in your notes here. It says, if anyone ever asks you, what would Jesus do, remind him that flipping over tables and chasing people with a whip is within the realm of possibilities. Because it certainly is. I think we forget this. I think we always want to think about Jesus as the one carrying the lamb and just petting and all the stuff. Really, read what he said to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and them. He did not mince words. Jesus, when he said something, he meant it, and he would just cut you up one side and down the other. And he walks in, but this is not something he went around doing every single day. I mean, he didn't get angry every day and just start throwing a temper tantrum and all the rest. But this required the Messiah, the Savior of the world, to get so righteously indignant that he came in and made a whip and was lashing people. And can you picture that? There's a wonderful video that's out there that I was going to play of these people running because he's going around just waving this whip everywhere. He was upset. Why? What would have made Jesus so upset to act so maybe uncharacteristically? If pastors did that today, it would be an empty church. If we run around whipping everybody, all folks, in here run out, they would run out and never come back. Jesus had to do this again if you read the Bible. So they didn't take him as serious on the first go around here. But why was he so upset? I think that this story has been used many times to talk about pet issues within the church. I don't think it really ever gets down to the nitty gritty on here. Why was he so upset? I want to know. Dean says that they were in the temple courtyards, so they were on the temple grounds. What else? Huh? They were making it a business. All right, so I like those two answers. I think that's the reason. It wasn't the acts themselves necessarily that he had a problem with. It was what they were doing and where they were doing it at, how they were going about those processes and where they were doing it. And I just want to submit something to you. You've got to be careful, and we have to be careful in our own lives, in our homes, in our churches, workplaces, whatever the case may be, that things that make Christ upset, certainly, and for us, they start very, just with good intentions and good motives. And we bring things in and they slip in real easily here. And I don't believe that anybody started out thinking, you know what, let's really do something that's going to make everybody mad here at the temple. I believe the people that tried to do this were really having good faith and saying we want to solve some problems. And that's a good thing to be able to do most of the time. However, what it turned out to be was, when you had these animals here, you could buy an animal outside of the temple a lot cheaper than you could buy one inside the temple. Yeah. Anybody go to a Georgia game in a while and see how much a Coca-Cola is inside the stadium than it is right outside at the convenience store? You've been to the movies? Y'all going today? Good grief. I can go get a 40-something ounce drink for 79 cents at Circle K. I go get one at the movie. They said $7.50. I said, the devil is a lie. Yes, I did get free refills that I didn't need. But I felt I had to. Good grief, I spent more on one popcorn than that than I did to get into the movie. I felt righteously indignant. I wanted to turn their popcorn stands over. When I was in there, what in the world are you selling me popcorn for this amount of money? It's nothing. They're making a killing. They have to make that money because they don't make anything on the movies. I understand the economics of that. But that was the same thing that happened here. If you were going to buy a dove, it may be 2 or 3 times more expensive inside the temple than it was outside because they were trying to turn a profit. If you wanted to exchange your money, exorbitant fees, exchange rates that they would charge you inside the temple to be able to do this. Why? They was all about money. As Caleb said, it was about a business. They were doing business dealings here. And what started out as some really good ideas to be able to solve some problems turned into some institutionalized businesses that made its way right into the temple grounds themselves. And Jesus was not having that. That was not what he had envisioned for the temple to look like. And he says in verse 16, to those who sold doves, he said, get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market? Okay. When you take a look here at what he's saying, my Father's house, he understood what the temple was supposed to be. He understood that it was his Father's house, that there were certain things that's supposed to happen inside of that. And he didn't say that there's anything wrong with the market. There's nothing wrong with the market. There's nothing wrong with you wanting to go shopping somewhere or whatever. You want to buy these doves and cattle and sheep and exchange your money. There's just certain things that ought not happen inside of his Father's house. It doesn't mean that outside of that and outside of the house, those things may not be perfectly reasonable to do. But there is a distinction between what takes place. And now I'm going to take this, and I'm not saying in any way that there's a direct correlation between the temple and the church, because there isn't. Okay? The temple is something that is far superior to the modern day church, just like it was to the synagogue. And the church itself is not going to be rebuilt by the Antichrist. It's going to be the temple in Jerusalem that's going to be rebuilt. So there is a distinction. But I'm going to bring this home to mine and your understanding today, that there are certain things that ought to happen inside of the church that are perfectly okay to be out there, but are not okay to be in here. There is the distinction. Now, in Jim's Bible study on last Monday, he brought and he gives us notes, and I kept mine because this has been coming up. Anna Marie goes to Covenant Academy, and I think she's doing a paper here that's along these kind of lines about commercialism within the church or something like that, right? And she has a side that she's taken and going, and I've talked to Anna Marie about this. I've talked to all kind of people, and this is a topic inside of the church here. But I think, y'all, we've gone absolutely nuts. Jim put this on, and he had the real article, but there's a church right now that's offering beer and wine in their church as a means to attract people to come. Somebody say, where's that at? Bless y'all's heart down there. You better go find them, because it ain't going to happen here. But I mean, look, I have said before, y'all, and I know this is to much consternation to some people, it is not improper to have a taste of alcohol. The Bible says don't be given to drunkenness. Now, whether you can play with fire and not get burned, that's on you to do that. And whether that calls somebody else's to stumble in your case, that's on you. But inside of the church, I just don't know that I'm going to say, listen, you know what? We're missing a lot of people over here in this section. We need some more people. So next Sunday, what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill that up. We're going to have some brewskis next week. And I'm sure people are going to just rush the doors to get in here. They're going to knock people down to come to the church to drink beer. Where? I don't believe it. If I was unsaved out in the world and I thought, you know what, I've been wanting to go to church, they just don't serve alcohol. I just can't find, I don't think that one person on this planet, you know, and I shouldn't say this on live recording, but I am. Here we go, brace yourself. Do we want to have adult entertainment on our stage up here to attract those types of folks? And I'm just going to leave it at that. Oh, there are churches that have teetered with that idea that I read about. Y'all, what are we doing? This is not me just saying these. These are places that have discussed what I just said and are actually doing what Jim said. And there's a lot of other stuff on here that I could read about. There's a church that now hosting drag queen gospel festivals, insisting God is a woman. I mean, you know, you may like gambling. Let's put slot machines in here. That's going to fill up every pew. People are going to go, wow, finally, they did what I've been waiting for all my life. Put strip clubs and all in the church and drink beer and play slot machines while we're in here and all, and everybody's just going to fill the place up. That's stupid. And I certainly think it's worse than what Jesus walked into the temple courts and found that they were doing in there. My contention to you is this, though, because those are extreme examples, aren't they? But minutely within the church, how did we get to that craziness? We got to that craziness because we allow these other things that seem to be very innocent, very well-intentioned things to happen, to where we've made our churches now be places to where it's consumers What do you want? And I had to spend a lot of time as a young pastor expecting that I'll probably be doing this unless God takes me away for a good, let's say 40 more years. Well, the church is going to look a lot different in 40 more years. Think about how different it looks now from 40 years ago. And I got to think, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to be faced with, seriously, am I going to be faced at some point with church members that are not of the level of Ann Davis's and Miss Gladys Terra and Miss Mona Cup and these other people and Miss, I know their names, y'all, Martha Peacock, Vivian Marable, these folks that I've lost here and we've lost in this church, these saints that were older. And when all of you all that got any sense left in you are gone and the rest of us are left, and somebody's really going to come up to me and say, maybe they're a deacon. Maybe they're, I don't know, some advisor to me. And they're going to come up and say, Corey, I really think that how we need to really reach out to the community is we need to open up a bar inside the church. Oh, I can't wait to the day that somebody's got enough gall to come up and ask me. But that's happening already today. When it's going to break through the Bible Belt, I wonder. I mean, it's coming to us. Really? I think you got enough choices right now of churches and beliefs and all of that kind of stuff. And if that's not working, I don't think bringing in all this other crud is going to work either. I think we need to go back to what verse 17 says. And I believe this is the missing link in all of this. His disciples, I'm sure the disciples were going, whoa, he has gone crazy. Look at him. I mean, if you would just picture Jesus, if we did this in the play, it would be an awesome scene to put in the play, I think. And go around, you go, well, look at him go, what's the matter? And they went, oh, that's right. Remember it's written, zeal for your house will consume me. And that is from Psalm, and that's talking about King David, but it has messianic prophetic wording for the Messiah, that he would have zeal for his house, and zeal for God's house would absolutely consume him. Now that's the issue that we have in the church today. Rather than the church leading the world and leading the community, we sit back, and I say we because I'm a part of this, we sit back and we wonder what y'all care about. We wonder how can we get more of those people sitting in the pews? What could we do? How do we change our music? Do we just say, you know what, in order for you to sing, you got to be screened? Dr. Ashley, we didn't screen you before we got up here. Maybe we should. We didn't, okay? We didn't. But there are churches, you wouldn't ever get on a platform just going up there. You have to be screened, and you got to have background checks and all the rest of that just to sing, because they want perfection in everything. I'm going to tell you something. I don't think I read anybody in the Bible that God used that was perfect. But we care so much about the show. And you know why? Because y'all do. The Christians drive it. I do. I'm right there with you. Because we go, we want that in that church. We want this in a church. We're not going to go if they don't have all of this, that, and the other that are happening, the flashes and whatever. I'm not going to name everything because I don't have a problem with a lot of stuff that some churches do. And so I'm not going to give a ton of examples about what I'm talking about. But we cater to what the people want, as if this is a consumer business. See, you had the wrong idea coming here today. And some preachers had the wrong idea when they stand here, and this one doesn't. I don't care. They go, I really hope a lot of people got something today. I do hope that you get something from what I say. But from the whole experience at church, you should have walked in here to give something. And I don't mean the money. I pointed towards the plate. It's just a habit. I'm not talking about this money here. You should have walked in here to give your worship to God. Amen. Not going in here to say, well, what is God going to give me today? What did JFK say about the country? Ask not. Y'all were alive. Come on. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I think you ought to apply that to God. Ask not what else he can do, because he's already done enough, and ask what you can do for him in return. And that's what we ought to do in church. It ought to be, if I'm looking for a church, you know what Corey's going to be looking for in a church? Where can I serve best? Where can I use my gifts and talents and abilities that God has given me so I can serve there? I don't want to go to a church. I would not want to go to Charles Stanley's church, though I love him. I would not want to go to that. I wouldn't have a place. I wouldn't have a purpose, okay, for what I'm able to do in that. I just want to go somewhere where I can serve. Now, you can serve in large churches. There's no doubt you can. But I'd probably get looked slap over and those things. I like to go somewhere where I can be of use to what God has done. I've been doing that since I was a small boy in a tiny little Baptist church called Wheeler Heights Baptist Church on Riggins Mill Road, and I was doing and being used. That's me. But there are other people that want something. They have a list, all right? And I'm saying that's the problem in the church today, is that when people say, well, the church is a business. I can tell you, I run a business. I run 2 bank offices, and I get all into the reports of return on assets and all the rest of that kind of stuff. This church is not a business. It has elements of a business, but I can tell you right now, we have no mechanism to raise prices. We can't charge you more. I mean, we don't even charge you 10%. We don't charge you 9%. We don't know what you give. You give, you don't, you don't. That's the way it goes. This is not a business. And if you've ever been on a board and it ran like one, well, that probably was an issue. It's not. There are income and there's expenses and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and you got to manage certain things. It is a ministry. And if you run it like a business and you don't run it like a ministry, you should and will fail at that. It's not a consumer organization to where it ought to capitulate to what the masses want. Because more often than not, the masses are wrong when it comes to God. All right? We ought to lead. We ought to instruct. We ought to disciple. We're here to teach, not, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but not to be taught what we should do. If you've got to teach me how to be your pastor, you need to find another one. That's too high of a role for you to be up here with somebody who's an absolute crazy person who doesn't know anything. And the leaders of the church ought to be wise. They ought to have wisdom. And you shouldn't have babies. And that's why you got to stick around for a little bit. We don't elevate people that just got saved right up to a place of leadership, because it's immensely deep and responsibility that is laid upon us to be able to instruct people in the way that God has told us to do that. So it shouldn't be that we're being led by the nose from a bunch of people that want something like that. If you want a hiring like that, you better fire me right now, because that is not within my blood to be able for you to do that to me. So sometimes I've given pushback to people about things in church, and sometimes I've been right, sometimes I've been wrong. Probably more right than wrong. That may be my ego saying that. But I'm saying that we've got to change something in the world today, because the church should be a place, and I think I put this in your notes, we ought to focus on being who God called us to be and doing what God called us to do, and in turn lead the world rather than allowing it to lead us. Okay? The problem that I have is not that churches have coffee shops or drive-through windows or whatever ever else that they have out there. That doesn't have a problem with me. There's certain things should and should not happen within the sanctuary in my mind, but the church is often looked at as a venue. Hey, I want to have a wedding, I want to have a baby shower, I want to have a birthday party, over there, and I ought to get to use it because it's nothing but an entertainment venue. That's the problem that the church has sold, is that we're just an entertainment venue that can be used for anything that anybody wants us to do, and it's not the house of God anymore. And I just want you to know that if there is, as a young person and as somebody who pretty well understands how the world thinks, if I want to go to a bar, I'm going to go to a bar. If I want to go to an adult entertainment thing, which I don't, I'm just using this for rhetorical purposes, okay? If I'm going to go there. I don't want the church to be a cheap imitation of the world. That's why people don't come. Because the church is trying to be a cheap imitation of what they can get genuine from the world. So they go, why go there? Why? We've got to have our own purpose, our own standard, and we ought to be a destination. We ought to be something that people say, you know what? I can't get that anywhere else, and I want to be there. If you want people to come, be different than what they can get at any other place. That's fundamental business right there if you want to get there. If everybody's got a checking account that's the same, why come to my bank instead of the one down the road? You know what I tell people when they go, well, another bank's got that? I said, you know what that other bank doesn't have? What I tell them, Debbie smiles. I think she knows where I'm going. I said, you know what Robbins doesn't have? Corey. Woo! There you go. All right. That does that, but though that makes a difference. You can go to church and have preaching and singing and all the rest. The people make the difference. How you treat people. It always will, and it always is right now going down to who gives you the best customer service, the best genuine feeling, and who can I know that if I go and I fall, they're going to be there to pick me up, not kick me when I get down. So I'm just saying what my intentions are, and we're trying every day. I want to be a place to where it's not trying to be a cheap imitation of the world, but being a place that is doing what God has instructed for us to do and rely on that. And if he says do something, if he says change, we'll do that. And I tell the board all the time when we're praying, and we pray, God, if we make a decision that is outside of your will, stop us. Change it. Because what we want to be doing is God's will. I can promise you, if you get down to where we have a zeal for God's house and not a venue, people are going to come because there are so many hurting people right now that are looking for answers. They're looking for somebody to invest in them in deep ways and to get answers that the world and bars and strip clubs and drag queen festivals and all the rest of that stuff can't answer, and only the church can. And if they walk in the door, we ought to be able to answer those questions. Ought to be able to invest in them in that way. And then they'll go, you know what? That's the place that I need to be. And they'll realize all this other stuff is trash. But I just caution you to be careful at what we're allowing into our churches and how we're trying to communicate the gospel some way. Are we doing it because God said so, or are we trying to play to the consumer mentality? It's obviously not working because we've got more churches than ever and less attendance every year. Let's get back to the way it should be. And I can tell you when you do that, God's way always works better.